Welcome to a free EDUCOM Knowledge Sprint by IISPM. My name's Larry Bernard, and in the next 15 minutes I'll provide an overview of the key points of managing sustainability scope within your projects. In this sprint, we will provide a high-level overview of better planning for strategic risk and considering new and helpful tools and techniques specific to sustainability management. Join us every Wednesday for a more in-depth 45-minute sprint. Register today. I'd like to take a look at challenges to risk management. So risk management, identifying and managing project sustainability risk, is definitely one of the challenges faced by any project manager today. Now there are 4 key things that I want to look at in particular. Added complexity to strategic risk enterprise risk management, defining risk thresholds, incorporating sustainability into those thresholds, the mathematics of risk, and in particular things like compound risk, so we'll take a look at that, the psychology or the psychological theories of risk, and the challenges there with dealing with human beings. And one of the challenges there is something called an out of context problem, so we'll come back to that. Let's go through these then. First of all, added complexity. One of the realities with adding sustainability scope to your project is that it forces you to now look at your project holistically, to look at whatever we're doing instead of from one angle or one direction or one view. We're now looking at it from every angle, every view, top, bottom, side, backwards, and on it goes. And the reason is that we now understand, or at least better than we did, that everything we do has some type of impact. So if you're using materials that are virgin materials taken out of a mining site as compared to reusing recycled materials, well, that has an impact. If we decide that we want to have 10% more meetings around the world this year, that means we're all going to be on flights and going around and staying in hotels. That has an impact. If we're going to buy products from a company in Turkey instead of a locally sourced company in Chile, that has an impact. If we're going to ship on flights instead of ships, that has an impact. On and on it goes. Everything that you do has an impact. So, we have to be very careful. In addition to this, we get into a couple key roles that have been added to the world of project preparation, project planning, project oversight. And that would be business analysis in general that is typically involved in pre-project planning, developing business cases and feasibility studies and so forth and so on. And the expectation there would be to incorporate all of this analysis up front so that we have a better understanding of what we're getting into. And in addition to that, another role would be that of an enterprise architect. An enterprise architect would be taking a look at all of these things and looking at our interconnected systems, our interconnected, whether it's software, hardware, architecture, business processes, logistics, procurement, accounting, taxes, on and on it goes. Everything is connected in some way, shape, or form. And so when you touch one system, you may not realize it, but you may be impacting a system that's 10 times removed from that system. So the complexity is increasing exponentially and is that much more difficult to assess the risk therein. Another aspect would be what we call risk thresholds. Now, traditionally, every organization that has mature processes for project management will have established risk thresholds. So what's a low risk, what's a medium risk, what's a high risk, and they'll define those risk thresholds with respects to what's a low risk with respects to cost, what's a low risk with respects to scope, schedule, security, health and safety, and so forth and so on. As soon as we add in sustainability and say we have new variables that we have to measure on things like we were talking about environmental management plans, waste reduction, corporate social responsibility, community projects that we're involved in, then what happens is we now have to develop risk thresholds for those variables and to sit around and discuss and agree upon translative narratives that explain what's okay from our perspective for each one of these things, right? And we may not have done this in the past. So this is something new that we need to add. Now, we can expect to see that the math in all of our calculations will be more difficult, more challenging, and more complicated. So, the challenge here is that risk has increased exponentially. We're dealing with, instead of just simple, I identified 5 risks and here are the risks and the probability of these risks is this and the potential impact is this. Well, that's great. But the reality is when things occur in real life, they don't occur as individual risks. They occur as a cluster of risks, as a combination or a compound set of risks. And when they occur, they're not occurring in a static environment. They're occurring in a fluid, dynamic environment. So what happens is whatever happens right at this second, it's going to impact what happens 1 second from now, 2 seconds from now, 2 minutes from now, 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, 2 years from now, and so forth and so on. So, for example, I was looking at information on the nuclear meltdown in Japan and the repercussions since then. I was looking at this overview map that showed the Southeast Asia mapping right across the ocean to the west coast of North America, and it showed the movement of nuclear radiation across the ocean to the west coast of North America. Now, there were people that had anticipated these things, but to see it physically, I don't know how they demonstrated it on a map, but it's something that just kind of blows your mind when you think of trying to calculate these things when you're pre-planning a project, for example. So for that nuclear power plant, when they were planning it and building walls to protect it from the ocean and anticipating tsunamis and all these other things, did anyone anticipate the cluster of risks that would occur on that day that would cause this nuclear meltdown and cause nuclear waste to travel halfway around the planet over time? The calculations, the probability calculations, and not just 10 calculations, but thousands of calculations, millions of calculations that have to be done within a risk simulation to better understand and to provide better scenario planning and to provide better probabilistic outcomes of what could happen under different circumstances simply becomes more challenging than pre-project planning that we've done in the past. Now, in addition to that, another variable that we need to look at is something called the psychology of risk. Human nature is such that we tend to be pretty good at dealing with things that are right in front of us, but when you remove something and place it somewhere in the future, we tend to have difficulty dealing with that. So we have a harder time seeing it, we have a harder time planning for it, we have a harder time preparing for it, all of the above. And this makes risk management that much tougher, because when you propose, hey, we may have this risk and we may have to deal with it, many of the stakeholders simply won't see it and they won't agree. So, good example here in this picture, I spent some time up at Pond Inlet in Nunavut last year, and looking across the water from Pond Inlet, you can see Bylot Island. Bylot Island is famous for these glaciers. There's a dozen glaciers behind that ship in the picture. And those glaciers are receding at an exponential rate that is astonishing but also horrifying. There are scientists over there right now measuring these things and trying to grasp how quickly they're going to continue to recede and what the impact of that may be on things like climate change and the world as we know it. But even as all that's going on, you still see these ships, these ships that can only come in for a few weeks a year because the rest of the time up there the water freezes over, or there's enough ice in the water that they can't make it in. But you still see these ships coming in with tourists that want to see what's going on in the north, and they want to see the glaciers, and they want to see what life is like up there. But they don't seem to understand the connection between the increased carbon footprint on the planet that they're incurring as they, come up to see what's going on. The odd person coming up to see what's going on from now time and again is one thing, but bringing up a ship of 3,000 people all at once has a huge potential detrimental impact on the environment, especially if we start increasing that. And there's a project going on right in that area that'll be increasing shipping in the not one ship a week, but it'll be many ships per day, per week, all year round. The impact on the environment will be beyond comprehension. In this sprint, we have provided a high-level overview of better planning for strategic risk and considering new and helpful tools and techniques specific to sustainability management. Now don't forget, every Wednesday we run a more in-depth sprint, 45 minutes. You get a free PDU from PMI. We look forward to seeing you there.